So today we're going to do another build here in the studio at Microcenter, and I'm very excited about this one because this one's going to be a little bit different. At the core of today's build is going to be an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 7970X. We are going to do a workstation Threadripper build that we're going to use for AI, maybe some other intensive tasks, and the fortunate thing is Microcenter now has bundles including Threadripper CPUs. So you can get this AMD Ryzen Threadripper 7970X. You can get that paired off with 128 gigabytes of DDR5 ECC memory, as well as a TRX 50 motherboard. And you can save up to $1,000 when you get that bundle. So that's a really solid bundle if you're looking to step up into a Threadripper kind of build. Now, remember, this is just the Threadripper, not the Threadripper Pro. So this is the TRX 50, not the WRX 90, which is that higher Pro workstation level. But in terms of performance, this is really, really great. And if you want to get yourself a more budget-friendly AI machine, this is really the way to go. Now, the 7970X, that's going to give you 32 cores, 64 threads, 160 megabytes of cache, 128 gigabytes of DDR5 ECC memory, so that's a really good start for everything that you're going to need, and this Asus Pro WS TRX 50 Sage Wi-Fi motherboard. Now, for the rest of the build, I want to talk about some of the other things we have here because I have this Artic Freezer 4UM cooler. And some of you may already know this, but if you pair off this cooler with this motherboard, you may run into some slight compatibility issues with the fans not being able to fully fit on the cooler because there's a shroud on the fans and it might not fit correctly with this style of motherboard. Fortunately, Artic actually has an STL file for a universal fan bracket that you can 3D print yourself. So I actually have that running on our 3D printer right now, and I'm going to grab that once it's done, and we're going to see, can I get this to fit? Can I get this to work properly? And am I going to need that 3D printed bracket? So let's try it out and just see what happens. I think that'll be kind of cool. Now, another thing that I want to mention, I am pairing this off with an NVIDIA RTX A4500. Now this has 20 gigabytes of GDDR6 ECC VRAM. So ECC on the memory and the VRAM as well. Now that's really necessary for this level of compute that we're really aiming for, especially when it comes to AI. Eventually, I would like to pair this off with maybe a couple more of these. I can fit a couple in this case, and we'll talk about the case in a minute. And I went with this guy because 28 gigabytes of VRAM, that's a pretty good start, but I am looking to get more GPUs into this build, and this is kind of the way to go. Now, I do also have a 5090 from PNY. This is the PNY A4500, and I also have a PNY 5090. So I might go either way. Maybe I'll mix and match. Maybe I'll try both. Who knows? But 32 gigabytes of GDDR7 VRAM here, and then 20 gigabytes here, but I am planning on getting at least 2 or even 3 more of these to fit in here. I can definitely fit 3. I'm not sure if I can fit 4, but let's see where we end up. And the other reason I went with this guy is the power draw, because this is just one single 8-pin. So I'm gonna have a much easier time getting multiple GPUs fitting there. I can probably get 60 gigabytes pretty easily if I get 3, and that's only gonna be 3 8-pins. But meanwhile, this 12-volt 2x6 connector, and this is gonna be a 600-watt power draw. It's gonna be kind of tight. Now, I do have a 1600-watt power supply from Corsair. This is the AX1600i. So in terms of power, this is gonna give me more than enough for our CPU, which is gonna take a lot of wattage, and the GPUs that I wanna put in this. Now, starting off with the one GPU, we're gonna be fine. When we put the 5090 in there, it's also going to be fine, but I'm not gonna be able to put 2 5090s in here, which I thought about doing because I do have another 5090 over there, but there's just not enough headroom to really make it work. Maybe I could do 2 power supplies, but now we're really getting out of hand. So let's just start with this and let's see where we end up over time. Now for storage, I have a Samsung 9100 Pro. This is going to be our fastest SSD that we have at Microcenter, so that seemed perfect for this build. That's a 2 terabyte capacity. I also wanted to put a spinning drive in this guy just so we can have some bulk storage, so I went with the WD Red Plus. This is a 4 terabyte, so that's going to be good for some extra bulk storage. I always like having spinning drives in my computers that I like to use for more intensive workloads, especially when I know I'm going to have some really chunky files on there. I'm planning on also trying this out for video editing. I know Adobe, maybe they've gotten better at multi-threaded, multi-core workloads. DaVinci Resolve, I'm really interested in trying out on this machine, and I do want to try out some different graphics cards with that. Really just kind of mix and match and see what works best. Now, for the case, I have the NXZT H9. I wanted to get something nice and big, but also something that looked pretty nice as well, because, you know, even though this will be a workstation, I still want it to look nice. We're going to put it right over here on this table, and we're going to put it to the test. So that's everything that's going into the build. Now it's time to start the build. Now, first and foremost, if you have never installed a Threadripper before, or have used a Threadripper or built with one, it's very different. It's very different than your AM5 socket. It's very different than your LGA 1851 socket. This is very unique. So this is an STR5 socket, and there's a little plastic holder that's actually on the Threadripper CPU itself. So you do not take this off, and this is actually the carrier that you're going to use, this carrier frame, which is going to insert into the socket. So not only is the socket different, but there's actually some major differences on the motherboard as well, and we'll talk about that as we go. But first, I'm just going to get the CPU installed. So Threadripper comes with this handy little tool that you need, and this is actually what you're going to use to get the socket open. So right here, first and foremost, it says you have to open it in this direction with screw number 3, 2, and then 1. And then when you close it with screws number 1, 2, and 3. So you can see that the screws are labeled very clearly. There's 3 screws that keep the frame in place. So using the tool that they supply, that's what you're going to use to undo and redo the screws there. And even though some things are different, not everything's different. It's still lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. That part hasn't changed. The reason this is so different is because the Threadripper itself, the CPU, it is very large. So that means all of that surface area has to be locked down in a specific way so that it's making good contact, because, you know, the bigger it gets, the more force you're going to need to really keep it down, keep it in place. So now, ta-da, there we go. So there's a couple of different components here. This part slides up, and this frame is actually what we're going to slide our Threadripper into. There's also a plastic little cap here. This has to be removed before you insert it. And there's also a socket cover here. So you have to make sure you remove the socket cover, you remove this plastic piece. Threadripper is going to slide right into place. So I'm going to take this off. That is a lot of pins. So you have to be extra careful here. These are some, you know, pretty expensive components, so you really want to be delicate. Don't drop anything. Make sure you have a good grip. Don't rush. Next, I'm going to slide this right out, and this is pretty easy. There we go. So everything is set. Now for the fun part. I have our Threadripper right here. I have it on our carrier frame. The carrier frame does a pretty good job of holding it in place. You don't want to be too careless with this, okay? Now this is going to slide right into place. That's heavy, by the way. Like, it's heavy. So you want to make sure you've got a good grip on it. And there you go. All set. Everything's looking good. I'm just double checking that the contact is good. You can see that the little brackets are lined up. All right, let's do this. So now we're going to gently push this down. Everything's in place, and we're going to lock it down. So now we're going to do the inverse of what we did before. We're going to close this with screw number 1, screw number 2, and then screw number 3. Using their tool. And this is designed in a way to sort of prevent over tightening. And there you have it. Your CPU is now installed. Our 7970X is installed and good to go. So with the CPU out of the way, everything else is actually pretty straightforward. We're going to install our memory and we're going to get our SSD. So again, this is different than your AM5 or LGA 1851 sockets. The memory is actually located on either side of the Threadripper here. Now, the Threadripper, the 7970X, this is good for 4-channel memory, so you can use 4 sticks of memory. If you go with a Threadripper Pro, then you can get those 8 sticks of memory, that 8-channel. And that's gonna allow you to get that really, really high capacity. We're talking about like 512, 1 terabyte of memory. But right now we're limited to 4 channels, so 128 gigs is a good start. These open up like any other memory slot. Just pop those right open. The other one is just kind of already in there. See our notch right over here, line that up, and just slide them right in. And you really want to make sure you're doing this on a soft surface because I am applying a good amount of pressure to get that guy in there. There we go, that's number 4, and looks like we've got a good connection on all 4. Perfect, now we're just gonna move on to our SSD. So, SSD slots right under this heatsink here. So this part should be very familiar if you're used to any other consumer motherboard. M2 slot right over here, so that just goes right in. And this has a nice little quick release latch, all done. Gonna peel off our little plastic piece here for the heatsink so our thermal pad can make good contact. This is a Gen 5 SSD, so heat is definitely something that you want to dissipate. So this will go a long way here. All right, cool. So our motherboard is all prepped, CPU, memory, and SSD storage. Now, while I have the motherboard out here, I do want to point out that this motherboard is designed for single power supply or dual power supply use. So remember when I was talking about running into that issue with the 5090 if I wanted to do 2 5090s, not having enough power with that 1600 watt power supply? Well, I could do a dual power supply configuration. And fortunately, I do actually have 2 1600 watt power supplies here in the studio. So I could get that set up, and I think I'm going to save that for a later video. But this motherboard does allow you to use 2 power supplies. You can see that there are some extra power connectors on the motherboard itself. And this is actually for the second power supply. Out of the factory, they have these little plastic covers that keep it covered. So the connectors that we're going to focus on for just 1 power supply, they're all the ones that are going to be open here. Our CPU power is going to be right up here. We have motherboard, and we have some more PCIe power over here on the side. But if we want to get that second power supply going, you just plug it in right over here, and then these other 2 cables here. So you're not going to need a jumper. You can actually plug it straight into the motherboard. So thought it'd be something kind of fun to play around with, but I'm thinking we'll do that later. For now, let's just get this guy up and running, and then we'll just go from there. I was doing some more prep work here. I have the case all set up. So this is our NXZT H9. Nice and roomy case. Okay, so motherboard is ready to go in, and just like any other motherboard, it's actually really, really easy. Just gonna angle this in just like that, line it up to the posts. Oh, I think I got it on the first try. No, I didn't. There it is. Now I got it in. So I'm going to get our motherboard screwed down, and then I'm thinking cooler, and we can move on to getting everything kind of powered up. But this is going to be a pretty straightforward build for the most part. The motherboard and the Threadripper CPU, they could really throw you for a loop if this is your first time doing this. But all in all, it really is the same exact process as any other build. It just scales up a little bit differently. Now, if you were doing something rack mounted, it's going to be a little bit different, slightly, only because of the form factor and trying to get everything to fit into that small, little rack mount chassis. But otherwise, we're looking pretty good. Now, for the time being, I'm going to stick with the included fans that come with this NXZT H9. My plan for this is really just to sort of be our in-studio workstation, because we just haven't had a Threadripper yet. Our top-of-the-line kind of system has been that 9950X, or actually 9950X 3D that we have in our workbench, which is sitting right over there. For that one, you're maxed out at 16 cores, 32 threads, which is still a lot of power. So the 7970X, right? 32 threads, 64 cores. So that's a big step up from like a 9950X or a 9950X 3D. You can do some AI stuff with just a CPU. So you can keep everything CPU bound without a GPU. And I am very interested in trying out LM Studio CPU only and test the 9950X against the Threadripper here, the 7970X. So I'm curious to see how that performs. I mean, really, we should get a big jump in performance because you have double the cores, double the threads. Beyond that, it will be nice to test out some more Threadrippers now that we sort of have the capability here to start messing around with them. I'm really going to lean away from gaming when it comes to this. I'm really focusing on AI and other productivity things. Remember, this is not a gaming build. Threadrippers, as cool as they are not really optimized for gaming. So I just have to say that 10 times over, just to really ensure that everyone understands that it's really not a gaming CPU. Cool. Motherboard's mounted in pretty well. Now we can just get our cooler going. So the Artic Freezer 4UM, it's a really nice looking air cooler here. Basically, everything's the same, just scaled up a little bit. You have your plate here. That's where it's going to make contact with your cooler. So for this guy, I have to attach the hardware on the sides, and then the cooler, there's already hardware here in the socket where it's going to attach. There's these two little plates, so you can see pretty clearly. There's two screws at the one side that are closer together, two screws on the other side that are a little bit further apart. So you can see I have the plates here of what's closer together and what is further apart. So it's a pretty easy fit. That's just going to go right on there. I just have to screw this onto the cooler itself. So that'll be really quick. Here on the cooler itself, it actually dictates which way the air should be flowing. So you want airflow to go this way. So you can see there's this channel in here, right? This kind of like concave little section, and air is going to flow that way. So I want air to flow in the case this way, over, and flow out that way. So that means this guy I want to attach on there. So that means I have to put the wider set on that side and the closer set on this side. And I can already see what people are talking about for the fans here, because the shroud of the fans, it is supposed to rest right on here. So this is supposed to slide down, I believe, or it just clicks into place. But because of the way that the shroud attaches and the way it kind of bottoms out here, that, yep, that's going to hit that right over there. I'm going to go check our 3D printer in just a minute just to see if those brackets are done, because I might just swap this out with some generic 120mm fans. But for the time being, let's get the hardware installed. So they have this little baggie with the 4 screws to attach the hardware. Also comes with some thermal paste. Now, thermal paste pattern for a Threadripper. What do you guys think? How should we go? I'm thinking just one big line down the middle and then a couple of dots around just to sort of fill it out. I think that should do it just fine. All right, so it's 2 screws on either side to get this bracket installed on the cooler. And it should be long enough that the print should be done. I'm gonna go check the 3D printer in a minute. So that'll be pretty cool. I was able to fit 2 of the 120 universal 120 millimeter fan brackets on one single plate for a Bambu Lab A1. So I'm gonna go check that out. I had to check it before for a minute just to make sure that the first layer was good. Adhesion was looking good. This is a functional part, doesn't have to be pretty. I just use some black PLA for now. Although I think PETG would be a little bit better, especially when it comes to the heat. So I might just print another one later and just swap it out. But for the time being, for the sake of this video, I really just want to test it out and want to see if I can get the actual fans to fit versus the universal fan bracket. So let me go grab those. So I have the 3D printed universal adapters for the 120 millimeter fans here. And the cool thing is that it actually has the Arctic logo. It's basically just a 120 millimeter fan adapter, and it's just gonna clamp right on there. Even has some channels inside for the screws to go flush. So you can just use some fan screws, screw that in. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get the cooler onto the motherboard, get it in place, and then we'll try to figure out this fan situation. I wanna see if we can get the included fans to work, and if not, we'll go with the universal bracket option. Now, all of that is to say, if you are planning on getting this bundle, and you wanna go with this cooler, then you might have to go through some of these hurdles here. I really wanted to go out of my way to demonstrate it just to see what that would be like. Tons of other cooling options available at Microcenter. Obviously, we have tons of coolers available even for Threadrippers, so that's a non-issue. I just went out of my way to make this harder for myself. Thermal paste. The manual for the cooler says to do an X design, so I think I'll do that. They came with a little thermal paste here. Hopefully this should be enough because this is a small tube, but it should be more than enough for what we need. All right, so thermal paste, let's get it on there. So I'll go for a nice long kind of X. Nice. Maybe I'll just put some dots just for fun. There we go. I had to fix a quick whoopsie because I forgot to take off the plastic cover on the bottom. Can't believe I actually did that, but I caught myself, I fixed it. I made a mess of the thermal paste, so I had to clean that up. But now we're all good to get the cooler on. I always make a point to talk about that to show that I have proof that I got it off on camera. And I literally caught myself doing it. Now we can take a look at our cooling situation for this guy. So we have the 2 fans here. Let me just see which one is going to be. Got it. Okay, so this one's going to be our exhaust fan, and this one's going to be our intake fan. Now, the way this fits on, it snaps on just like that, but because of the VRM there, it's not going to fit. So what you can see is it's raised. I mean, a good centimeter, maybe more actually, just full on like almost ½ inch. And that's about as far down as I can really get it because it's bottoming out right here on the VRM. That's at least for the intake fan. Let's see about the exhaust fan. Same kind of deal for the exhaust as well. It just doesn't mount. See, I can snap it in. I have clearance, so this will work, right? Like, this will work. See, it snaps into place. I do have clearance for the tempered glass. Yeah. It just looks kind of ugly, right? So what I can do is I can use these fan brackets, but I think even the universal fan brackets are actually going to give me a similar sort of thing where they're going to hang over the top. Yeah, because once I get the fan on here, right, it's still going to bottom out in the same kind of way. So that's not going to change it that much. If anything, it's doing almost the exact same thing. So even with this 3D printed bracket, it's still going to give me the same issue. Okay. Well, I'm going to stick with the included fans for the time being then. They're going to look not the greatest sticking off like that, but it's going to be perfectly fine. In terms of airflow and performance, it's still going to work perfectly okay. This shroud is really meant to be sort of a perfect wrap around the heatsink here, so you get sort of a perfect wind tunnel effect going through, even though the heat fins are open on the sides. So that's okay. Let me snap these into place. I wanted to try it out. I really wanted to see if that fan bracket would work, but you could see the height here because it has a heat sink on top of the VRMs. It also has fans built in on either side to keep that nice and cool. And you really do want that robust cooling for the VRMs under there. So it's a specific quirk of this combination of cooler and motherboard. I really just wanted to see what would happen if I put them together. But now we know. But these snap right into place. That's easy peasy. These can link up. And then there's going to be a fan header right up top here that we can use. That's it. It's all connected. I'll clean up this cable in just a little bit. But for the time being, I'm thinking let's start running some power to the motherboard. Let's get those cables out of the way. And since it's a modular power supply, this AX1600i, I can just start running all of those cables now. So EPS over here, EPS over there. We have our ATX power, our motherboard power, and some PCIe power over here. So we have one EPS connector right up here. That's going to plug right in. Other one's going to be right over there. And like I said, if this is for the single power supply design, if you wanted to do 2 power supplies, you can use these blocked off connectors here. And it's really just 3 additional cables that you'll need to have a dual power supply configuration. That's something that I do want to try out, but we'll try that out in a later video. Our workstation here. It's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to try out a lot of different things. I'm actually really looking forward to it. All right, so motherboard power right over there. Pretty straightforward. And then what do we have? A 6-pin. What I will say about this Corsair AX1600i, it comes with this really nice bag that comes with all of the cables, and they are all very, very clearly labeled. So you know exactly what everything is. You can grab exactly what you need. I really like that it comes with a ton of PCIe cables because I am going to need them. But I really like this. This is actually really, really nice to have this in just one easy to grab bag. Sometimes with power supply cables, when it's a modular power supply, they'll be like individually wrapped in baggies and stuff. So it's just kind of nice that they're all packed away in that tote bag and you can just take what you need. So this is going to be additional PCIe power. So I'm just going to get that plugged in. So there's a 6-pin and an 8-pin. So you can see, got all of our power to the motherboard set. I am going to need some SATA power for that spinning drive that I have. The fans, looks like the fans can go directly into the motherboard, so that's fine. Don't think I need any additional power there. Let me just clean up my workspace a little bit. So right back here, that's where we're going to put one of the spinning drives, so that's going to be a pretty easy one. And I think this just pops off. Right. Does it slide up? Yep, it slides up, pops off. There we go. And I can just mount it straight in here. Should have the mounting hardware in that baggie over there. So I'll mount that drive there. We have all of our case cables here. What do we have? Yep, RGB. Yeah, why not? Let's have some RGB in this one. Rest of our case cables. There we go. So our front USB, front USB-C, front panel, unified front panel. Always happy to see that, and our HD audio. Cool, this is gonna be quick and easy. First, I'm gonna start routing all these power cables into the back. All right, so EPS power is routed to the back. There's a nice little channel right back here so I can route the rest of these power connectors. Cool. There's all of our power. Kind of snaked right back there. I'll even just let it all sort of hang out in the power supply channel out here. So our front USB, I'm going to do both of them. So our USB 3 and our USB-C. Just going to put them through this side channel here. Okay, so case cables are all set. No LED header on this motherboard. Why would there be? This is a workstation level motherboard. This is our SATA connector, which is going to be for our spinning drive. So we have SATA ports right over here on the side. Just going to get that plugged in and route that right to the back. All in all, though, this is a pretty straightforward build. Originally, I was going to go with just sort of a regular black box for the chassis. But for the chassis, at the time of at least filming this video and when we're getting everything, this was kind of the biggest one that we had at the moment that we can get our hands on. So I figured, okay, fine. I don't really mind that it's white or it has RGB that's going to be non-functioning. This really is just about power and performance, and I just wanted a big house to keep it in. I really like how roomy it is back here. It's really easy to work back here, so I really have no complaints. Cool. So I have our WD Red Pro 4TB drive here, and this fits really easily. Slides right in. And we use these drives a lot here in the studio. I just like having bulk storage available. Again, we go through a lot of space. I mean, we went to Santa Clara and shot a bunch of video. We shot about 1 terabyte of footage in the course of 5-ish days. So yeah, it's always good to just have some bulk storage. SSDs are great. They're really, really great. I still work off of the SSDs mostly, but basically whenever I'm done with the project, I just like to transfer it off the SSD onto the hard drive. If I ever have to open up that project file again or access any of that footage, the bandwidth, there's still more than enough throughput to access that file, do any exports or any last minute changes. But I just like to keep bulk storage. 4 terabytes, pretty fine for what we have going on here. But installing the drive, that's it. It's on there. It's on there pretty good. This just slides right back on. Just line it up with the 4 little notches. Slides into place. And there you go. Now, it's a little bit of a rat's nest back here. I will clean this up. Our SATA connector for data, that just plugs right in here. I really like the layout in this case because this, again, is a really nice and easy workable space. Sometimes, to be perfectly frank, with some cases, even some dual chamber cases, the spinning drives are kind of an afterthought. And to be perfectly frank, not a lot of people are using them that much anymore, and that's okay. Someone like me, definitely want a spinning drive in my build. I will use it 100%. But if this was not a Threadripper, and if this was a gaming build, then yes, SSDs, really that's all you need. A couple M2 SSDs, perfectly fine. I am going to clean up the cables, but first I do want to get the power supply in there. So I'm going to get this set up. And that is a big guy. That is a big guy. But again, fortunately, this is why I went with the H9. The look of the case may be somewhat asynchronous with the use case of this workstation Threadripper build, right? Because this is really just kind of a RGB crazy gamer case. But specifically, I wanted a big, roomy case that I can do everything I need to do in there, shove everything in there, and get the Threadripper up and running. And I knew that this H9 was really the way to go. It's just really, really easy to work in. So you could say that the case is somewhat incongruous with the rest of the build, right? Especially for a workstation. That's totally fine. That's the cool thing about PCs. You can customize it however you want. So yeah, there's this nice little shelf here. So that's going to give you the support that you need for that power supply. And then the 4 screws are going to keep it in place. We are basically on the tail end of this build, minus some cable management, plugging in these power cables to the power supply, and getting a cable for the GPU. Now I'm going to start with the A4500, because again, that is just one single and simple 8-pin. And I did do that on purpose because I do plan on getting some more and trying out multiple GPUs. LM Studio allows you to utilize multiple GPUs with ease, and you can group them together and they can be different GPUs. You don't need NVLink or any sort of SLI or anything like that. You can use basically whatever GPUs you want. And sure, if you were lumping some GPUs together, you're going to lose some throughput, but that doesn't really matter for this specific use case. It's all about that VRAM. You really just want as much VRAM as possible. And it's still going to be plenty fast for what local AI will need. So all that's left really is one last 8-pin PCIe for our GPU. And then I can get some extras for when I want to try 5090 in here. So here's what I'm thinking. Today we're going to try out the A4500. We're going to see how that performs. I want to try some CPU bound stuff in LM Studio, just see sort of what happens. Try out that A4500. 20 gigs, you know, that's pretty good. I've been using 24 gigs of VRAM with LM Studio for a while. So it might not be as fast as, let's say, a 4090, but it's going to do you pretty good. So I do want to try that out a little bit. And then I'm thinking later in a follow-up video, I want to try a 5090. And then I want to do a dual power supply bit and try two 5090s. All right, so everything's all set. The last thing to do is get our GPU installed. So I'm going to get our PCIe slots out and we'll get this guy going. But all in all, this has been a pretty straightforward build. Installing a Threadripper, while it may be intimidating, is actually pretty easy. It's really not that hard. The cooler situation, I really just wanted to see what would happen, but I guess now we know. So definitely, if you're looking for a cooler with this bundle, only look for something that will 100% be compatible. Talk to the associates at Microcenter because they can help you out with that one. All right, get our slots out. And this is our A4500. So I think this will be pretty cool. I like this one a lot, and 2 slot, it's gonna be pretty easy to fit multiple of these. And what I really like about this the most, it's not just the fact that it has one single 8-pin, but it's also the fact that it's located on this end. So it's gonna be a lot easier to hook up. It's not gonna be dangling around like it does when it connects over here. So let's get this plugged right in. There we go. Got it in the PCIe slot, and we'll just get those screws back on. Yeah, this is right up against that cooler. It's nice and snug. Like I said, I'm going to pick up a couple more of these cards because I do want to try these A4500s, kind of rank it up against what a 5090 can do. You know, I really want to see what is the sort of optimal setup for AI. And that's something that I'm just going to test out, and we'll do a follow-up video on that. You know, do you want to go with one of these Pro cards? Are you going to do just fine with a 5090? You know, power draw, what do you want to aim for in terms of performance? Like, what are you getting? You know, because if you can get the similar kind of performance with less power draw with a setup like this with multiple GPUs, maybe that's the way to go. And there's going to be some other Pro cards that we're going to be testing in this as well in the near future. But GPU is all set up and everything's plugged in, good to go. I mean, like I said, I would call this a somewhat incongruous build, but it was really easy to build in here. Really, really easy. So let's get this guy to post. I'm going to leave the panels off for now while I get this set up for the post screen. I'll use my portable monitor, plug that in, and we'll go from there. All right, so we got a good post here. I got everything set up. I got this guy closed up, so it's looking pretty good. I can see we have our 7970X there with our 32 cores. Oh my goodness. All the memory was there. It took the memory a little bit to train. That always takes some time, especially when it's this much memory. I mean, it's 128 gigabytes, that's a lot. Drive showed up, Samsung SSD is there, our Western Digital spinning platter drive is all there, so everything's good to go. I'm gonna get Windows installed, and then we're gonna try out some AI stuff. Okay, so I have everything set up with our new workstation. Everything's working, drivers are all installed. I got LM Studio running. I did Llama 3.1 8B. I was getting 58.49 tokens with just the, and that's tokens per second, and that's just with the A4500. So that 20 gigabytes of VRAM. With a 4090, we were getting anywhere in the 50s to 60s, usually kind of depended on what we were doing and what the model was. But usually with Llama 8B, that was about what we would get. For this, I'm definitely noticing an improvement with CPU only. I did it with just the CPU and I was getting about 13 to 14 tokens per second. So that Threadripper, yeah, it was performing really, really well. I have a lot more to configure, and to be perfectly frank, it's not all gonna fit into this video, but the good news is that we're gonna do a lot of content about our Threadripper setup, about our bundle, and we're gonna do a lot of content about what we can do with a setup like this when it comes to AI. Now, you may notice I have an Asus 5090. This is the Astral. This is a behemoth of a card, by the way. I also have that PNY 5090 as well. Now, the first thing that I'm thinking I'm gonna do, and this is gonna be in a follow-up video, but I'm going to put both of these together in this case. I have another 1600 watt power supply, so I'm gonna be able to power everything pretty easily with this setup. I just have to get the other power supply plugged into the motherboard, get these guys plugged in, and we're kind of good to go. So that's gonna give you 64 gigabytes of GDDR7 VRAM, which you can use in LM Studio with no issue. I'm also downloading Llama 70B right now, so I'm still getting everything set up. Frankly, it's gonna take me a while, and I'd rather get this video wrapped up so then we can just do some follow-ups. But that is today's Threadripper build. I'm actually pretty happy with the way that this one came out. And remember, you can get a Threadripper bundle that's gonna come with the CPU, the memory, and the motherboard at your local microcenter. And there's gonna be more bundles and more Threadripper news to come, so do stay tuned, and we're gonna have a whole bunch of more fun content coming. Stop by your local microcenter, and if you don't have a microcenter near you, then be sure to comment, hashtag, I want a microcenter near me.